Good morning, everyone. So today is 9 tips to be less like a lemming. Okay, so it's voting season is upon us, so we might as well take some steps to be less like a lemming. So here are 9 tips for that. Don't assume that voting issues are binary, R versus D. The reason is because that's just absurd. If you study anything about political philosophy, especially ethics, philosophy, things like that, the underpinnings of all of these issues, to think that everything could be neatly categorized binary, one or the other, is just absolutely absurd. So if you find yourself saying, oh, it's either D or R, you need to take a step back. 2, don't assume that every policy that promises something is what it promises. Promises aren't reality. Okay, I know this is a shocker, but just because a politician promises something and they also say that if you oppose this, then you're some moral monster, that doesn't mean that's actually the case. Okay, we always have to remember the principle. So Latin phrase qui bono. It's who does it benefit? Okay, politicians benefit from getting power. How do they get power? Well, they have to convince their constituency to basically get the power to them. Okay, so does it necessarily mean that every politician's bad? No. But it's pretty obvious that if somebody's trying to get something, you always say, well, what is the motivation? So take a step back. Suspend judgment. Okay. You should suspend judgment for many reasons. If you are wondering if you understand all the issues, if you automatically think you understand all the issues, well, that's a big red flag. Anyone who's actually studied politics and logic and ethics and economic theory, all of these things are rather complex. So if you think it's so easy and obvious, that's a red flag. Okay. To simplify something that's very complex is to break it down into pieces. So next step would be evaluate issues independently. The idea is try to break things down into their different arguments and look at them independently, one at a time. You're taking apart a machine, you want to look at the various pieces to see if they're all functioning together. Next thing is understand different aspects of the policies. This is very hard, so I'm not saying this is an easy thing to do, but you need to understand that anytime that you were dealing with policies, there's moral dimensions, there's empirical dimensions, there's economic dimensions. These sometimes are overlapping, surely, but they're actually different. So, for instance, if someone said, hey, should I give this $1,000,000 to the poor? And then you just take a picture of people, getting in the $1,000,000 and you see how happy this person receiving the money is. It's like, well, according to one reading, that's a good thing, right? Now, what about if the money was stolen from a bank? Well, that seems to change things. But sometimes in political questions, people just assume that they have $1,000,000. But that's not an assumption that you should make as a rational voter. You should take a step back and say, well, do they have this money to give? That's a big question, right? Some people are comfortable with the government taking any and everything because they think they own everything. Other people would say, no, that's not right. The government doesn't have $1,000,000 or $1,000,000,000,000 or $1,000,000,000. They actually only have tax bases, which is actually owned by people. Now, you can't just capture things and distribute things. Okay, but that's a discussion for another topic. Exercise a little skepticism about policy promises. Again, specifically when they appeal to things like envy, revenge, divisiveness, blaming somebody. These are complex issues. Anytime they're striking a very emotional tone, you should worry. Okay? Again, that doesn't necessarily mean your emotions are wrong. Sometimes your emotions are right on. But the problem is sometimes they're not. Okay? But anybody that's striking a chord on an emotional level, you need to be a little aware. Take a step back. Think about what's going on. Consider the argument. On the previous video, it says, learn your fallacies. If you don't know what a fallacy is, check into that. Find out what the fallacies are. Fallacies look like good reasoning, but they're not. They make appeals to things that seem to be, strong and credible, but in reality they are not. So take a step back. 8, look at strong defenses for both sides. This is obviously very hard because there's more than 2 sides, but look at the strong, credible, look at the people that you think, oh, this guy's at least is well-meaning. Don't find the ones that you think would, oh, that person's crazy. Don't assume that they're crazy. Hear what they have to say, understand them in terms of premises and conclusion. Look at the argument. Suspend judgment to analyze it. If you automatically just know that they're just wrong and crazy, you probably didn't even look at the argument at all. Okay, so look at both sides, independently analyze it. Okay, 9. This is an outgrowth of some of the other points. Don't assume that there is some deep-seated racism, bigotry, etc. behind everything of your opponent. That's just absolutely silly. Are there racists? Sure, of course there are. But nobody's saying that there aren't any of those things. The issue is whether you can ascribe racism or bigotry to a position or to a person or position so easily. You should have a burden of proof to say that this is actually the case. And also, again, the argument stands or falls in relationship to whether the premises are true and whether the premises link together in a valid way. It's not whether or not this guy is, whatever. It's not dependent on that person, okay? Because remember, a bad person can have a good argument, a good person can have a bad argument, an evil person could enact a good policy, etc. All right, so thanks for listening. Check out my website, commonphilosopher.com. There's a link to a larger article. You guys have a great day, and let's be more reasonable and have a great weekend.